Hello everybody, I know most of all of you here through being a volunteer and then coming on board with Colorado Mountain Club. I'm Mary Bradley. Used to be specific to the Denver group and now membership services. I first got acquainted with Linda and then got acquainted with John. They formulated the backpacking section. They had called former membership director Lauren Schwartz and said, we need to come in for a meeting. Lauren was quaking in her boots going, Linda and John are coming in together. I heard about John Walters, and so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. Well, in walks this big 6'4", tall, lanky guy with a big smile on his face. I'm like, okay, so what's the problem with John? Never had a problem with him, and at the end of this, if I can make it through without crying, I will tell you how much he meant to me, as well as dear Linda does. We sat in a meeting for about 2 or 3 hours, and it became very obvious that Linda and John had really put some thought into this backpacking section. I now conduct, along with my friend and mentor, Ashley, we conduct the new member nights. I talk very fondly of backpacking section as the blueprint for any section that wants to get started here at Colorado Mountain Club because of all the work that John and Linda put into it. In the initial meeting, they would talk about things and then Linda would look at John and go, is that okay with you? Does that sound okay? Is this going to be okay? And John would nod and look and, yep, okay. And so off they went. As Linda mentioned, backpacking started out with 1,600 people. It was like, holy cow, how are we going to serve all those people? Was one of the emails that Linda sent to me. We decided to formulate that we would do a annual fee to maybe cut down on that, but then also increase the social aspect of it, which happened. Anyway, again, the backpacking section now is the blueprint and the wonderful section that I use as a guide for going forward with CMC stuff. So my personal story about John. I learned very quickly that John was a very, very tall pussycat. He had a gruff demeanor sometimes, but never with me. I got a chance to be with him, to talk with him, to exchange stories. My last time with him was at our gala. My dad was a P-47 pilot during World War II and was 5'11". And like John in his younger years, I'm like, whoa, dang, good looking guy. My dad was, I have to tell a personal story. John started laughing and he had his oxygen on, so it complicated him trying to laugh. But I said, well, my dad served over in Dover, England, and flew missions over into Germany in his P-47. I went to England and went to Dover and visited some of the places that my dad had been, so followed in his footsteps. When I came back home from England, my parents lived in Casper, Wyoming. I called up to Casper and we had old rotary phones. For those of you in the room, that's a thing where you put your finger in it. For the rest of you, no, you just text and all that stuff. Anyway, we had 2 rotary phones, one upstairs, one downstairs, so Mom answered the phone and said, just a second, let me get your dad on the phone, okay? So we had a conference call. It was, how was your trip? Oh, it was great, it was great. I went over to Dover, I followed in Dad's footsteps. And then I made the mistake of saying, Dad, you cut a dashing figure through World War II. I'm surprised I didn't see my twin over in England. Well, this is long before he met my mother, who he was devoted to her dying day. He absolutely adored her. But I made the mistake of saying, so I expected to see my twin. My mom hung up the phone in my ear. Dad said, Mary, that was probably not the best thing you could have said. My mom wouldn't speak to me for almost 2 months when I would call. John thought that was very funny when I saw him at the gala. And anyway, I said, John, Okay, you remember that my dad was a P-47 pilot. He stood 5'11". John, and when John would give me a hug, I came right into the middle of his chest. You're 6'4" and tall and lanky. How did they ever let you in to fly planes? How did you scrunch into the cockpit? How did they let you do that? They should have said no. He said, that's exactly what happened. He goes, do you know how to compress your spine? He goes, I learned so that I was actually able to qualify and go ahead and fly my beloved planes that I wanted to fly. So when we met at the gala, he was in his oxygen and moving slowly, but still John met me with a big grin. But instead of the usual hug, it was going to be a fist bump because he had his mask on, getting ready to start his chemotherapy. So gave him a fist bump. We talked for a long time. We talked about him scrunching his compression of his spine, et cetera, and then went on our way. As the evening wound down, he and Linda were getting ready to leave. Saw them and went running after them as they were headed out this door. You guys, let me give you a hug, let me give you a hug. I reached out to John to give him a fist bump, and he goes, oh no, come here, kid. He always called me kid. He said, come here, kid, let me give you a hug. And so my last wonderful memory now is being enveloped in John's arms and hearing those words, call me kid. And now his lovely daughter, Laura, who first time I met her, I said, oh my God, are you related to your dad or what? You're a spitting image of him. So now I am Mary the kid. But John, we love you and we miss you very much. Thank you for all that you brought into our world. Thank you, Mary. How about somebody else? Some hiking stories? Carol Bennett, who is a leader and who was encouraged to be a leader by John.
I'm not that short. This will be short and sweet. Years ago, I was awarded a black belt in Taekwondo. Now, don't ask me to do anything now because I can't get my foot up here. But anywho, we were walking along and John was introducing me to one of the newcomers in the club, and she said, oh, this is Carol, she does mud wrestling. Oh, thanks, John.
So a little side story with Carol was that it was a celebration of John's birthday hike, and Carol had a beautiful one-layer cake that was frosted. And she said, oh, John, I know you're going to love this cake. And so he puts it on the picnic table, gets out the knife. I said, Carol, what is this? She said, well, why don't you taste it? So he picks it up. It is frosting-covered styrofoam.
Okay, my name's Melinda. And I've been a member of the club about 7 years, and it was on one of my very first hikes, and at that time, there was always a waiting list, and I didn't know there was something like an A hike, a B hike, a C hike, so I just signed up for what was open. And so I was way over my head on this hike, and I was struggling, and John he must have been the rear leader. He came up to me and he says, you know, I'd be happy to carry your pack for you if you think you can make it. And he never had to carry my pack, but just because he was so kind and thoughtful and realized I was struggling but wanted to continue, you know, he made me want to do it again. And I really love the club, and I always loved John, and it was always so much fun being in his car because you would just learn so much. I remember one time it was either raining or clouds were forming or whatever, and I mean, I knew more about lightning than, you know, I think, you know, you could look up on the internet now, but it was so interesting and it was so kind, and I'll always have fond memories of him.
just noticed the motorcycle picture up there, the photograph of John and Angie and her husband at the time, and they had a lot of great trips in Colorado. So this is the story I want to tell. His brother, Dave, had a motorcycle for sale down in Texas. So John gets on a plane and then he plans to ride the motorcycle home, which he did. Once he got home, he set out on finding a safe riding partner. Now, how do you find a safe riding partner? Well, you advertise. You advertise on Craigslist, you advertise in other locations. And then, once somebody says, yeah, I think I'm safe, and I've had so-and-so training, then John would connect with them, and he would interview them. And he would talk about what schools they'd had of motorcycle riding, etc. And somehow, over an entire year, nobody ever met the standards. Not surprising. And even though he'd ridden motorcycles for many, many years, when he got his brother's motorcycle, what's the first thing he did? The lyrics said he exuded safety. That's exactly what he did. He took a class at, is it Fay Morris Motorcycles on Hamden and in that area, but he took a motorcycle class, even though he'd been riding for a number of years. Okay, let's have another story from someone out there. Aha, here comes Ms. Louise Campbell-Blair with her English accent.
Well, there's so many stories about John, and I've just got two short ones and then just a verse from a poem. So I've done many hikes with John and was happy to serve with him on the backpacking committee as well. But one story he told me, he was planning on root canal surgery with his dentist. And he's like, you know, I don't want to have any of those anesthetics and all those, all these anesthetics because they knock me out and I won't be able to hike the next day. So he said, I'm going to see if I can remember my military training to use these mind games they taught him to overcome the pain of root canal surgery. John, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. The dentist might not want to do it. He said, well, I'll see. So, of course, his family probably knows the story. He goes and has root canal surgery, refuses all the anesthetics, and he said, didn't feel a thing. Not quite the use for the military training, I'm sure, but anyway, he thought it'd be useful in the backcountry to be able to overcome pain. And another story, not related to CMC, but several of us volunteer in Roxborough State Park, and towards the end, John had stopped volunteering, and I was working in the visitor centre, and the new female ranger was saying, I'd heard about this guy, John Walters, all this experience he's got with raptor monitoring, and all those nature hikes he did, what can we do to get him back? So I said, oh, I'll give him a call. So I called John up and say, hey, you know, we really want to get you back. And he's like, not really interested, but if you're telling me the new female ranger's asking, I might. So sorry if that's not politically correct. And then there's just a poem I think would be just one verse I'd like to read out if you'll bear with me. This is by Dylan Thomas, and it's do not go gentle into that good night. And I think this just describes John. I mean, he was camping right up until the last minute. He was hiking, I think, the same week that he passed. So, you know, he lived life ferociously. So, just one verse. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of the day. Rage, rage against the dying light. And I think to me that describes John. So let's rage in his honour.
All right, who else do we have? Valerie, come on up. Well, Valerie's coming up to tell you a little story fairly recently. It was maybe 18 months ago. John was struggling with being as fast as he used to be. And so he says, you know, I really think I should just cut out backpacking and camping and maybe I'll do a few hikes. And so he talked about that, and before I left him, I said, you know, you might really want to rethink that whole thing about quitting backpacking and camping. The next day I get an email, forged at 2:30 in the morning, and it says, "These are all the reasons that I think I should quit." And that was a full page, okay? And then on the second page, it was, "But there are mitigations that we can use for me to overcome all of these negatives." And the last line was, "So thanks for making me think again. I guess I'll still hang out with you guys."
I'm Valerie Walker, and I had was blessed to have hiked with John and with Linda. One of my very first hikes with John, I can get quite talkative on the trail because I live by myself and I hike so I can talk. Anyway, we stopped and he said, "Wait a minute, it did something up here." And I don't know if he had a hearing aid or he didn't, but I was thinking, that is where this man gets his serenity. And then way late in our hike, and I had known John for quite a few hikes, quite a few years, and he turns to me and he says, "You know what your problem is?" And I'm thinking, I have problems. "Okay, what, John? What is my problem?" And he goes, "You're just too damn independent." And I thought, there's the pot calling the kettle black. I don't think John, John never met, I don't think he ever met someone he did not want to talk to. He was just that open and friendly, and he had that $1 million smile going on. And he was really willing to tell you what he thought of you. I mean, there was no holds barred on that, but he did it with love. He was really, really very kind, very loving, had high standards. Let you know when he didn't meet them, but he did it with love. And it's my pleasure to have known him. Thank you.